Hello and welcome to part two of how not to end up in hospital taking off labels and supplements. So in this part I am going to be talking mostly about what it is I actually take. So if you've seen any of my previous videos, which I know most of you won't have, then essentially what I'm doing is a low cost version of metabolic therapy. So I've been looking into the anti-cancer properties of pretty much everything I can find. And then depending on what I can afford, I essentially put that into my protocol. So to try and help with that, I did start a GoFundMe some months back, and I tried promoting it with some videos, but I never got any real traction with it. And so it's still there, it's still available for people to help out if they feel they want to. But my focus now is more on educating people as to some of the pitfalls that can come about, or with taking even off-the-shelf supplements, but in particular when you mix them with off-labels, the antiparasitics in particular. This, again, it's my story. This is not me making any kind of attempt to give people medical advice. I'm not saying this is what you should do. Obviously, you'll need to do your own research. Your cancers could be very different from mine. I have stage 1 colorectal cancer, and it's actually known as a cold tumour that I have. It's at the moment hopefully still very tiny. I'm hoping everything I'm doing is having an impact on it, but it grew after several months to 1.2 centimetres after being diagnosed. And what I'm doing to try and treat my cancer holistically may not work for your type of cancer. You would have to do the research and check whether the supplements and the off labels potentially could be effective for whatever type of cancer you have. And if you can, always speak with medical professionals, run it by your oncologist, because they may be able to give you some tips and tricks. Most likely, if they're in the NHS, so in the UK, they probably won't. They won't advise. They won't talk about it because it hasn't had enough of the advanced human study trials in large enough numbers for them to be able to, I think, probably legally talk to you about it. But I have spoken to my professors that I'm under, the oncologist that I'm under at UCLH, and whilst it's their opinion that these things just don't work, because that's the general consensus in the NHS, that there's not enough evidence to suggest that they do work. With all of the research and studies that have happened and that I've found and looked into, which I'll show you some of, because you can go and look it all up. A lot of what I've researched, I've started to put online, and so you can go and look for yourself, and it won't take you nearly as long as it took me to figure all this stuff out. So basically, like I said, I'm going to show you what I'm taking today. It is slightly different from what I took when I managed to get myself into hospital for 6 days, but I will get to that very soon. So this is my kind of, I used Claude to basically take a look at all of the supplements that I was on. So I didn't include the off labels, I just added those as to when I'm going to take them after. But these dots where they show the primary action pathways, the secondary pathways, so the primary are the 3 green dots, the secondary are the 2 purple dots, and the blue dots are minor action pathways. Now these aren't even all the pathways that are affected by all of the supplements that I'm taking. There are more, so I will be expanding this out a little bit more over time. but these are the ones that the AI Claude considered were the most relevant for each of these supplements. And so you can see I'm taking EGCG extract, which is an extract of green tea. The resveratrol, so I take a trans resveratrol, so it's more bioavailable. Sulforaphane, again, I take a more bioavailable version of that. Artemisinin is something that I've only just recently added. So that's creating oxidative stress, hopefully in and around the site of the tumour. Question. But let me show you. So some of the research that I did is already online and available for you to look at. So essentially what I've been doing is I've been putting the research, so this is obviously for the EGCG, so this is the green tea extract, and essentially what we've been looking at doing is giving people an overview of the areas in the cancer that can be affected by these supplements, and up to, the sort of the dosage that have been studied. So you can click on sort of various studies and things. These are combination therapies that we looked into. So what's been studied in combination with what else. If you click on these, they will basically go to the sites and do a search. So instead of you having to go and find these, you can just look at some of the research that we've done just by clicking on the links to science. And now some of them where there's huge amounts of different studies, you'll just get to the page where it shows you all the studies, and then you can try and narrow it down to your type of cancer. But we've tried to cover as much as we can. There's Q&A here, so how accessible is it? So if it's available over the counter or not, who does it work for, resistance mechanisms, preclinical, clinical studies, and genetic markers that might have an impact on how effective it is. So all of this is here, and there's a few that I've just pulled up. So Hesperadin is another one. So that's from fruit. Has various anti-cancer properties. These are the cancer types that it's been tested against, so you'll be able to find studies on those. And we are expanding this data all the time and changing it, so trying to make it better. So again, quercetin. I've recently done more research on that and found that quercetin actually works quite well with not just curcumin but also vitamin C. So you take equal amounts of quercetin and vitamin C, and that helps absorption. So it can have more direct impact. Omega-3s, obviously fish oil, the good fish oil, not the bad fish oil. This is, again, this is a list of side effects. So lots of gastrointestinal issues, smell, taste, can cause allergic reactions and cardiovascular effects. So we've done all this research and put it up on metabolictherapy.com to try and give you a base, a grounding of where not just we are in our research, but like I say, we're adding to this all the time. We're thinking about it. We've made some changes. So you can see this one. We've started adding the research specifically. So we got AI to help with this, so that it starts adding links to the research for each specific section as you go through. So when we look at dosages that have been used in trials and studies, we give you the link to those trials and studies, and the sources that we used to try and figure out how much of the supplement is safe what a therapeutic level would be for that. And if you're taking it at the higher doses, the more therapeutic levels, what are the likely side effects and potential interactions with other drugs that you might have. And so, part of the reason that these supplements, for me, I've grouped them the way that they are, is because what I'm trying to do is have an impact on the colorectal cancer by grouping things together that essentially are helping each other out in doing what they're doing in fighting the cancer. So, like I say, this is by no means a fully in-depth study of everything I'm doing, but the other thing to be aware of is that this is on top of the ketogenic diet. So the ketogenic diet is essentially, let me come back to, on the ketogenic diet, what I'm essentially doing as a foundation for all of the supplements, and you can obviously go and look at the research for nearly everything that's on that list in the Excel sheet. 70% fat is kind of the top level. So with that, I use mainly dairy. So I'm using eggs, cheese, creme fraiche, Greek yogurt, double cream. It's essentially, lots of dairy to try and get the fat content up as high as I possibly can. So my daily fat intake is around 70 to 75%, but it is, with the help of a lot of dairy. I have used things like bacon in the past with, the fat. If I eat some pork or some beef, I try to get the ones that have got lots of the fat contained within the meat where I can. So that helps with the fat content. And also, particularly in the case of beef, it has additional nutritional value. It's not just fat. So again, go and look up I think Kent Carnivore on YouTube has a lot of information about all of the dietary information for the carnivore diet, the keto diet, essentially, because it's high fat, low protein, and cutting out as much of the carbs and sugars as you possibly can. Now, in the case of people like Steak and Butter Gal and Kent Carnivore, because they're not talking about the diet in terms of anti-cancer properties, although they are basically saying, you can eat a lot of meat and you can eat a lot of protein, with the type of ketogenic diet that I'm doing, you don't want to eat too much protein. Yes, you want to cut out the carbohydrates and the sugars, but if you eat too much protein, your body is able to convert excess protein, so protein that you don't need for just maintenance of muscle mass and the few things, the other things that it needs protein for. If you eat too much protein, your body will convert that into glucose. And the reason that we're avoiding carbohydrates and all forms of sugar is because it's essentially a direct fuel source for cancer. And because we don't want the cancer to have the ability to grow and metastasize, move around the body, start growing elsewhere, we're cutting off as much of the sugar as possible, and obviously that includes carbohydrates, because carbohydrates, particularly most of the complex carbohydrates that are in foods from supermarkets, convert into glucose super quickly and easily. The body uses that almost as if it's a direct source of glucose. If you've got sugars or glucose in your diet, your body will use those first. That's just scientific fact. That's how the body works. It works first on sugars, then on carbohydrates, then on proteins, and then it burns fats. Now, if you've got some body fat and you need to lose weight, then ketogenic diet is a fantastic way of doing it, particularly if you're using things like MCT oil as well to get your ketones up, or exogenous ketones, because burning fat and essentially producing ketones as an energy source for all the good cells in your body essentially suppresses the level of fuel available for cancer to grow. Now, it's not the only fuel source for cancer. Glucose is the one fuel source, but also glutamine is the other fuel source. Now, as far as anybody has been able to tell, and this is primarily based on the work of Professor Seyfried, glucose and glutamine are the only two fuel sources that cancer can use directly. Now, there are various stories around the internet of various fats and fatty acids that are potentially fuel sources for cancer. But from the studies that I've seen, where they've identified these fats and fatty acids as a potential fuel source for cancer, they don't exclusively feed the cancer cells just those fats or fatty acids. There is often either glucose or glutamine or both available at the time that they are testing for these other fatty acids. And even if you have high doses of these fatty acids, yes, the cancer cells may uptake those and use them as an internal mechanism for a certain form of protection. They don't convert it into a fuel source. And so essentially, if you can get rid of all of the glucose as much as you can being available to the cancer cells, and then you pulse the glutamine, which is essentially Professor Seyfried's metabolic therapy protocol, then anything else that you're doing, creating oxidative stress to attack the cancer, when those cancer cells are being attacked by that oxidative stress, so that might be HBOT, IV, intravenous vitamin C in high doses. It could be things like, so artemisinin is something that creates like oxidative stress. Using EGCG has some mechanisms that also pulse the uptake of glutamine for cancer cells. It prevents them from using glutamine as a fuel source. I believe that's part of it. Again, Dr. Casey Peevler on YouTube goes into all the multiple effects. There's dozens of pathways that EGCG upregulates or downregulates, or effects. And so again, a really good source of material for finding out some more in depth. Or go to the metabolictherapy.com website and look up EGCG, because we talk about that on there as well. But essentially, what I'm trying to do with my protocol is bring all of these things together, and essentially, whilst using the ketogenic diet to bring down the glucose and use things like the EGCG and all of the various, so I'll sort of lots and lots of all of those things that you saw on the spreadsheet. They're all tablets in bottles, and then essentially what I do is I put them into a Monday to Friday pill box, so you can see they're all in there. Essentially, the reason I'm doing that is because in the next episode, what I will talk about is exactly how it was that taking too high a dose of one of the off labels and one of the supplements together in high doses at the same time effectively caused stroke-like effects. And I will talk all about that in the next episode. But in this episode, I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit about what I'm doing to try and control my cancer. Now, this is the most basic form. Unfortunately, I don't have huge amounts of money to go out and do everything that I would like to do for a full metabolic therapy protocol. I would love to add in high dose IV vitamin C. I would love to add in HBOT. I would love to add the glutamine antagonist recommended by Professor Seyfried, but that's several £1,000s. And that added to high dose vitamin C at potentially £150 to £200 per session, 3 times a week, with HBOT at £70 to £90 per session. You can see it all adds up and gets really, really expensive really, really quickly. But I'll tell you what I tried to do with the off-label and the supplement as a kind of a, the poor man's version of the protocol to try and have a similar effect. And in the next episode, I will tell you about the doses that I took, the effects that it caused, the stay in hospital, and what came out of that, and what I'm doing differently now. Obviously, you saw that on my Excel spreadsheet. So, this is what I'm doing now, but this is as a result of making changes to the protocol that I was doing before, when I managed to get myself a nice little ambulance ride to A&E with a super long wait, and then 5 days, 5 nights in a bed on a ward at a local hospital. So all that's coming up in the next episode. I hope you found some of this useful. Please do make full use of the resources. Go and check out metabolictherapy.com. And if there's anything in there that you don't understand, go to school.com/cancer warriors, join up completely for free, and ask you any questions that you've got in there. I'm in there, lots of other people in there. There's over 400 people in our community now. And if you've got questions, we will do what we can to help. We can't give medical advice, but we can tell you what we've learnt during our research. We can give you the educational materials that we've found, and we can point you to the studies that we're using to create our protocols to try and treat ourselves of our types of cancer. So until next time, please do make full use of those resources, and I look forward to seeing you in the next part of the series. Take care and goodbye for now.